Next up is driving success, how businesses are benefiting from inclusive hiring, especially as we heard today through Dr. Mills and others who have spoken already. Today, in today's complex labor market, organizations are are being challenged to really rethink how they attract, retain, and grow talent. So, in this session, leaders from businesses, government, and nonprofit sectors will share their practical strategies for navigating workforce challenges, managing risk, and building effective partnerships. And this panel is going to be moderated by Stephanie Gale, who is the founder, principal, and diversity recruiter at Interwork. A little bit about Stephanie. She is not only the founder and president of Interwork, but is also a community leader who is an exemplary of social bridging. And Interwork is a recruiting and executive search and outplays firm that has been here in the state of Maine for over 8 years. Stephanie is connecting employees with talents and provides people-facing layoffs and other job transitions with career coaching, and is going to join us on the stage momentarily to invite our panelists. So, Stephanie, please welcome Stephanie.
Hello, hello. Hi, nice to see everyone. Thank you, Aisha, for the wonderful introduction. And I'm really glad to be here with you today with leaders from across the employer, government, and nonprofit sectors who are going to be sharing their insights. Uh, I'm We've got some wonderful panelists who will share their stories about navigating workforce challenges in a complex labor environment. And from this panel, you'll develop insights on how we can grow and support the talent needed to ensure a stable economy for Maine's future. Each panelist will share their story of challenges and successes that contribute to Maine's future. We'll then take Q&A at the end of the event. And our first panelist tonight is Mark McInerney. Mark is an economist who has served as the director of the Maine Department of Labor's Center for Workforce Research and Information, otherwise known as CWRI, for the past 6 years. And the center's core mission is to inform the public about conditions and trends in the workforce. Mark joined them in 2020 after completing his PhD in economics at the University of Connecticut. And he'll talk about how demographics shape Maine's workforce and economy. So welcome, Mark, and welcome all the panelists. I'll introduce each of them as they come, and then we'll take questions at the end. Mark?
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Can everybody hear me okay? Don't want to delve into my talking points until we make sure the technology is all sorted out, but thank you very much for the introduction. I thought it would be helpful maybe to frame this conversation in the panel this evening by talking about the interconnection between population and demographic changes, specifically here in Maine, and how that is a driving force in shaping our economy and shaping our labor market. So our population, the way that the population is changing, growing, and how it's shifting, demographically in terms of the age structure and the characteristics of our population, that is a starting point to shape our workforce. Who is in the workforce to create the supply of goods and services available in the state economy. And probably if you know anything about Maine's demographic changes, you probably know that Maine has an advanced age population structure. We have, relative to other states or relative to the nation, we just have a much higher share of our population in older age ranges relative to others. And that is going to be a really significant force in terms of shaping our economy and workforce in the years ahead. Simply put, we have more folks that are reaching age ranges where retirement decisions are more prevalent. Participation in the workforce is less likely relative to younger folks who are aging in, completing their education, and reaching their prime working ages. That kind of dynamic that I just described is going to become a constraint. It's going to constrain how quickly our workforce is growing, and that is going to create somewhat of a competitive, challenging environment for employers. At the same time, if we look at different generations of Maine's population, there's another pretty significant change that if we look at older age groups and younger age groups are much more diverse racially, ethnically, and on a lot of dimensions compared to older groups. So our population is shifting. Our population is getting older on average. The fastest growing segment of our population is actually the 65 plus cohort. But at the same time, our population is becoming more diverse. If we looked at, for example, those that are enrolled in Maine schools today, they would look much more diverse, again, in a lot of different dimensions compared to our workforce today. So our workforce is shifting in those ways and becoming, more diverse in a lot of different ways. If we looked at, our those that are over the age of 16 or over, who are of working age, and we focused in on the segment of the population that are not in the workforce today, the overwhelming majority are not in the workforce because they're retired. About 2 out of 3 folks who are over the age of 16 and are not in Maine's workforce are actually retired. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that the way that those demographic forces are shaping our labor market, specifically creating a competitive environment for employers. When workforce is growing more slowly, that creates a lot of competition to attract and retain talented workers to your organization. Often it's characterized quite negatively that we are, reaching a demographic cliff, or that there is a silver tsunami that's going to be, impacting our workforce. But I want to highlight also the ways that creates a lot of opportunity. While competition is challenging for employers who need to now, stand out in a relatively crowded labor market for recruiting, retaining talented workers, it can also lead to an expansion of economic opportunities for workers in many different groups. It can lead to an expansion of employment opportunities and faster earnings increases for folks that maybe in years past simply didn't have access to those types of opportunities. And maybe thinking about this a little bit practically, as an employer, what should I do with this information, or how could I potentially, stand out in a more competitive labor market environment, given the way that our population is shifting? So I would say from the employer's perspective, it's important to ask, am I reaching a broad pool of job seekers? Am I recruiting from groups in a way that align with how Maine's population age structure is changing? And evaluate what really are the core requirements, knowledge, skills, and ability that I need in my organization to be successful. As I mentioned, the fastest growing group is actually the age 65 and over group. So another, way to consider this shift is, is my workplace, does it offer age-friendly employment? Do I offer flexible, maybe part-time? Do I offer employment that is, offers autonomy and some of the other characteristics that, a workforce that's becoming older on average might be interested in? And overall, what is it that I offer in terms of on-the-job training, professional development, compensation, upward mobility, and the flexibility and mission of my organization? Does it speak to people in this competitive hiring environment? There's quite a bit of research that highlights the way in which that competitive labor market does indeed expand economic opportunities to people in a variety of different groups. I wanted to point to 2 specific examples. One is some evidence that's come out that suggests that in the years after the pandemic, when there was a lot of competition for workforce in Maine and nationally, that for many years we've seen growing earnings inequality between workers that had a college degree level of education or above versus workers that had less than a college degree. Those that had a college degree or above have long experienced faster earnings growth. And so having access to, pursue college education led to a career of more rapid wage growth compared to those who didn't have that opportunity. But in the years after the pandemic, it was actually the case that that gap shrank somewhat, workers who had less than a college degree experienced pretty significant wage growth because of the competition for workforce that was emerging in many sectors, which had the effect of actually reducing the inequality that had been growing over many years between those two groups. And the final example that I'll share is for a group that continues to experience many barriers to employment. That's specifically workers with disabilities. So if we looked at Maine's population today, specifically those between the ages of 18 and 64, unemployment rates are 3 times higher for those that have a disability versus those without a disability. And if we focused in on that group again, looked at all the folks that are not in the workforce between ages of 16 and 64, more than a third of those who are not in the workforce have a disability. So certainly it is the case that workers with disabilities and workers with many other characteristics still face really significant barriers to employment and economic opportunity. But again, from that competitive environment in the years after the pandemic, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that there was an expansion of economic opportunity in those years for workers with disabilities who actually experienced faster rates of employment growth following that really sudden, significant disruption that was caused by the pandemic. So, hope this was a helpful way to frame the conversation, and looking forward to hearing from all the other wonderful panelists that are coming up.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for sharing these great insights on trends in Maine's workforce development. Really fascinating. I think you said that the biggest growing sector of the workforce is 65 plus. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, so that is if you looked at how our population is changing in different groups, different demographic groups, including age, the 65 plus group is growing by far the fastest rate. And at the same time, we're living longer, healthier lives on average. Many folks have invested many years in their career and their education, and so folks are also working later into their careers than their predecessors did. So as a result, that combination of really fast population growth among the 65 plus, and we're living longer, healthier lives, we're working later into our careers than our predecessors did, comes together and is leading to a shifting of our workforce towards that 65 plus group for sure.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the work and research you've done in this area. Our next speaker, and people will get a chance to ask Mark and other people questions. Feel free to put your questions into the chat if you'd like, if you want to get them out there to start, or you can ask them on live speaker at the end of the presentation. Our next speaker tonight is Susan Rulin, who's president and CEO of the Lewiston-Auburn Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, where she oversees strategy, day-to-day operations, partnership development, financial stewardship, and long-term planning in collaboration with stakeholders across the Chamber's 16 member communities. Susan brings more than 2 decades of experience in economic development, innovation programming, and organizational leadership. Most recently, she served as managing director of the Dirigo Labs Accelerator at the Central Maine Growth Council, where she launched and led initiatives that supported startup growth, helped secure public and private funding, and built meaningful cross-sector partnerships across Maine and nationally. And that's actually where I met Susan, with a wonderful annual conference that Dirigo Labs hosts. Susan remains active in Maine's entrepreneurial and nonprofit communities and believes that the Chambers of Commerce play a vital role in creating connection, advancing opportunity, ensuring that all businesses of all sizes can thrive, and in positioning member communities for long-term economic vitality. So Susan is here today, and she's going to tell us about chamber initiatives like Strengthen LA Workforce Development Initiative, which is aimed at bolstering the local economy by supporting workforce growth with funding from the John T. Gorman Foundation. Susan, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be here. And Stephanie, as you know, from when we worked together at the Better Maine Conference, this is something I'm very passionate about. And I'm so fortunate to work with such an incredible group of people who really make the work that I'm going to talk about happen. And I'm gonna fess up and tell you that if it looks like I'm reading from notes, I am reading from notes. I'm 8 days into this new role, but one of the things that really attracted me to the role was this program called Strengthen LA, which is it's a wonderful initiative that I'm happy to talk to you a little bit about. Um, but let me just start by telling you a little bit about our region. So, Mark, I was really interested in what you were saying. I was diving into some of the data about Androscoggin County earlier today. One of my colleagues shared some helpful information. So we have some real advantages in Androscoggin County. We are one of the youngest counties, or the youngest county by several years. And we're outpacing the state in population growth, which is really exciting. But we also have some real challenges. Median household income is down below the national average. 14% of residents live below the poverty line. And while unemployment is low, workforce participation has declined slightly. So I think what that tells us is that this is less about a lack of people and more about how we connect people to opportunities. Um, this is really where inclusion becomes very real, like I would say. We are working with, through the Strengthen LA initiative, we are working with people who are entering the workforce for the first time, people who are re-entering the workforce after caregiving or recovery or justice involvement, and people who are employed but struggling to stay employed. So programs like our Ready to Work program are designed um, to assess that amend that situation. So one of the things that we really focus on are soft skills. We have found this to be deterministic in success in the workforce. So communication, professionalism, teamwork, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, because these are the kinds of things that we have found drive retention and growth. And inclusion isn't just about getting someone in the door, it's about if they can stay, succeed, and feel like they belong. So, a little bit about Strengthen LA and how we work together. Strengthen LA brings together over 40 partners across through private sector employers, education and training providers, community-based organizations, and workforce agencies. We are funded through a combination, as Stephanie mentioned, foundation support. Also, we have federal and state grants and very strong employer engagement. And while the chamber serves as the backbone of the organization, and importantly, this work is shaped and directed by employers and our very capable team. We are focused in sectors where workforce gaps are most acute: healthcare, construction and the trades, and childcare. And I would say childcare is especially important because if someone can't access childcare, they can't participate in the workforce at all. Would also add to that transportation. Originally, Strengthen LA operated as a collective impact model with shaped governance and decision making, but over time we have evolved that. So today we operate as a service-oriented partnership. Staff drive the work, partners contribute expertise, influence, and advocacy, and together we can move more quickly to respond to the real needs of this community. Some final closing thoughts that I think that it's really important is, I guess I'll say this one statement because I think this really summarizes what we do. Inclusion is about access, participation, and belonging, and it really is, inclusion is a workforce development strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susan, so much for sharing your experience and for jumping in and being willing to speak so soon after assuming this new role. Really appreciate that. Our next speaker is Wendy Hayes. Wendy is the business manager at R.W. Gillespie and Associates, Inc. in Biddeford, where she's worked for 6 years. The company provides geotechnical engineering, construction, materials testing, and environmental consulting services with a team of just 18 people. So hiring is very hands-on. Wendy has been directly involved in recruiting and supporting international employees, including H-1B hires and the local asylum seekers, refugees, and others to help fill technical roles. Wendy will be talking about how hiring diverse workers has impacted their work at R.W. Gillespie. Welcome, Wendy, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Stephanie. So I've been with them for 6 years, and it was listening to Mark, and he's talking about demographics. We're very practical little people, and really the labor shortage has impacted us. So inclusion includes trying to get anybody who is willing to do materials testing for us, which is challenging. Materials testing, I mean, I didn't even know what it was. So I've been there for 6 years, hopped into this job during the pandemic and went, oh, all right, so what do we do? And materials testing is the bulk of our employers. We also do geotechnical engineering. That's a whole different field that requires a lot more education. The geotechnical, but the construction technologists, they test concrete, they test asphalt, and they test soils. Nobody comes prepared for this job, so we try to find different people who have an interest in civil engineering at all, because we do quality assurance. So we end up training everybody. So when we had a labor shortage and I'm looking around and we have college students for the summer, but year-round employment is hard. I actually knew Stephanie from before and said, in IntWorks, I knew they were doing international working, and it turns out she had people who had civil engineering backgrounds who are from different countries who are looking for jobs. And we're like, oh, well, okay, we will hire people, Sure, I like everybody, and inclusion is just part of who I am, so sure, why not? And our biggest challenge has been the English language, because our people have to be technically right on target. You're talking about very detailed work that you have to know when you're working in a lab, because we work in the field and in the lab, and we're taking measurements of things, but communication is a big deal. So when you're in the field, you need verbal communication because you're talking to the owners of the projects, you're talking to construction workers, you're talking to the guy in charge. As quality assurance, sometimes we're a little bit trying not to get involved too much into arguments with people because we're saying that your work isn't up to snuff or that it hasn't met specifications. So yeah, you guys are great, but the specs call for this and we've measured it and it's only over here. So you need to have that kind of confidence in both your numbers and in your language skills. And that is one of the bigger challenges with the people from other countries. So they also have to do writing and written reports. But overall, like one person had some issues doing that. And so instead of getting more certifications for the work, we sent them to school during our slow period so that they could take an English class over at USM, which was very helpful in building confidence. So their conversational English got better. Still had some problems with work, but they got there, just building confidence. So that's our biggest challenge. But overall, it's been great because we have to train everybody. It's been good at opening people's minds and opening cultures up. We've had people who have very little exposure to the international community at all. I mean, a lot of us here all work in this field, or we've come a lot in contact with all different kinds of people. These guys are kind of in the construction industry, which has been predominantly a white male kind of closed community, and it's broadening quickly. But it's been really good for them to have people from all different countries. Like when I started interviewing with somebody else was at these interviews, and he's like, how come we hired somebody and their English wasn't very good, but this person's English is great? And I'm like, well, they speak English as their second language in that country, and they speak Portuguese in the other country. And it never occurred to them that they learned, that somebody in a different country with a totally different language for their home or their region spoke English so well because that's the language that they used. I mean, and to me, that was just, well, of course they do. And to him, it was a whole new experience. And so that's really good. And so he also helped somebody learn how to drive because they didn't have a license. And then suddenly they're sharing families and sharing food and sharing culture, which has been great. And it's great to have all these different cultures. And So when I look at some of the challenges, I also realize everybody has challenges. And you have challenges with neurodivergent people. You have challenges with somebody who likes to have their hair different colors all the time and going out into the field and saying, okay, can you deal with, can the construction industry deal with women in the field? And I've talked to them about, what your experience is. And yes, there's all the isms and the ists all over the place, right? People are racist, sexist, ageist, or whatever. But you deal with it one at a time, you deal with it openly, and we all learn from the experiences. And it's been really nice to have that international community in our little, just in this little place in Biddeford. And it's been wonderful. And Stephanie's company has really helped us out in supporting our labor shortages, which has been great.
Much, Wendy. It's been such a pleasure working with R.W. Gillespie and to see the compassionate way that you engage with so many people from so many countries. It's really just been phenomenal. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and your team, the wonderful leadership team there. And our next speaker today is Ben McConiff. Ben Conniff. I just want to, before I go into Ben's introduction and talk, I just want to remind people that if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A. And as part of that, you can let me know if you'd like to also go on camera. I'd love to have people go on camera for their questions and answers to engage directly with the panelists when they're done. So feel free to start lining up your questions. So I'll know who to go to first. Our next speaker, we want to welcome Ben Conniff. Ben is co-founder and impact executive for Luke's Lobster, another wonderful company in the Biddeford-Saco area that I've visited, and one of the best tours I've ever had of any facility. It's a certified B Corporation, seafood restaurant group, and grocery product brand that thrives thanks to its diverse workforce. Ben is also executive director of Lift All Boats, a 501c3 nonprofit pre-apprenticeship program addressing the lack of pipeline in the lobster industry and marine economy by offering resources, training, and mentorship to young people with no connection to the waterfront. So Ben will be talking about his work at Lift All Boats, an organization he started to expose minority populations to the field of lobstering through safe and low pressure introductions. And enjoy. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Thanks everyone for having me here, for listening in, and thanks to all the other speakers. So, Mark laid it out at the beginning. The demographics show that we are going to be in a very challenging hiring situation now and for the years to come. And that is just as true in our most celebrated heritage industries as it is in any other. And Maine's lobster industry is a perfect example. We think of lobstermen as rugged, individualistic people. The reality is pretty much all of them have at least one other person on their boat. And that person is crucial to being there to allow them to fish safely and efficiently and effectively. And when a lobsterman can't find somebody to work that second or third or fourth, depending on the size of their boat and the scale of their operation position, they can't fish, or they can't fish as well as they want to. So we have for years been hearing from lobstermen that young folks that grow up in that industry are not following in their grandparents' footsteps anymore, and that it's become exceedingly difficult for some people to find the next generation workforce to work as deckhands and sternmen. At the same time, we also know that there is a large community of young people looking for work here in the coastal areas of Maine who just aren't part of that culture. They didn't grow up as the kids of lobstermen or the neighbors of lobstermen. They grew up in different cultures, in different spaces, maybe living close to the water, but not used to working on the water. The fact that they didn't grow up in that culture doesn't mean they wouldn't like it, doesn't mean they wouldn't want to do it, and doesn't mean they wouldn't be incredible at it. It just means that they haven't been exposed to it. So any lobsterman I've talked to who is having trouble hiring a young person has told me, I will hire anybody who wants to work hard. All they have to do is walk down the wharf, and ask me for a job. And we are in a position in this state where we can no longer wait for workers to walk down the wharf and ask us for a job. We're in a position where we need to think about the full scope of great employees that could be out there, whether we are lobstermen, food manufacturers, restaurants, or folks in any other industry in this state. We need to be making the first step towards folks that could become part of our company, part of our team, or that second, third, or fourth person on our boat. Because work culture in Maine can feel quite insular. And that is, of course, very true in the lobster industry, where many people working there are in the sixth, seventh, eighth generation of people who have worked that job. Personally, I'm not from here. I'm from Connecticut. And so a lot of times, even I feel out of place when I walk down a wharf to go hang out with lobstermen. And I've been part of this industry for 16 years now. And I also look like a lobsterman if I just put Grundens on. So you can imagine how difficult it is for a young person from somewhere completely different who looks completely different to get comfortable in that lobstering space. And for someone to actually do their best work, they need to have that level of comfort that they'll be able to show up as themselves and work hard and not have obstacles thrown in their way simply because they haven't been exposed to the culture, they're not part of the culture, or they seem different. What we discovered at Lift All Boats is that it doesn't take a ton to bridge that gap. What it takes is first somebody to go meet these young people who are outside the industry where they are. So in our case, that's go to local high schools, go to the Boys and Girls Club, go to other organizations where folks who are entering those late teen years tend to be, work with people in their community who are influential, and work with folks in their schools, their teachers, their counselors, their extended learning opportunity staff, and just spend the time to get to know them and let them know that you want them to be part of your industry. And then what we do at Lift All Boats is we bring them down and we train them to lobster in groups of people who also are not industry insiders. So instead of having to walk into a situation where they're immediately in a full-time job on a boat in a culture they don't understand, doing a job they've never done before, with a high risk of failing and dropping out quickly, they're able to learn in an environment that's low pressure. They're coming once a week. They're learning at a slow pace, and they're learning some of those cultural elements of the fishery that they wouldn't naturally understand because they didn't grow up as the child of a lobsterman. And they do that for a summer. And then after that summer, depending how eager they are to get going in the industry, they're able to go find a job right away, to work full time their next summer, or they're able to take a slower path, come back to Lift All Boats for another summer, work a little harder, fish a few more traps, and then the year after that, they're ready to go stern. But the key has really been A, proactively reaching out and letting them know that they're wanted and they're welcome, and B, just creating that opportunity where it's safe for them to come in inexperienced, not do everything exactly right, and just have a little bit of patience as they learn the things that might come naturally to somebody who's been on a boat since they were 5 years old. And I think what's really important about the willingness to do that is looking at the complete arc of someone's potential over the course of their career. And it's easy to say, oh man, it's going to take a little bit of extra effort for me to bring that outsider into my company, into my workforce, into my industry. They don't get it. I'm going to have to put in some effort to bring them up to speed. But when you think about the talent that they could bring to your industry over the full length of their time in the workforce, that small investment becomes a tiny drop in the bucket. You know, if they're your sternman, they're going to be your sternman for probably 10 years before they get their own lobster license and go off on their own. If they're in your company in any other capacity, there's a huge amount of time that they can grow and thrive and contribute to the work that you're all doing. And when we decide not to reach out and bring folks from outside our existing work culture in, what we do is we really limit ourselves from the ability to have a meritocracy. Because in the real world, the folks who have the most talent and the best likelihood of success in our business and our industry, they might be just outside the periphery of what we're looking at in terms of folks currently in our culture. And with just that one little push forward, we're able to bring them in and have a much broader pool of talent to really find the best people. So that's what we're about at Lift All Boats, and we're excited to be a part of all the work that's happening here.
Wow, what an inspiring story. Thank you, Ben. It's so wonderful the way you're letting people know they're wanted and welcome in Maine and opening these pathways to work in lobstering. Really appreciate the wonderful work you would do both at Luke's Lobster and through Lift All Boats. Well, we can now take questions. I see we have one question in the chat, and I will also invite others to raise their hand or to pop a question in the chat. You don't have to pop the whole question. You can just say, call on me, and I'll call on you. So the first question is from Erica Martin, who does excellent work in marketing field. And Erica writes, Mark, how do we use the information you shared to create a sense of urgency with Maine employers to create more jobs, internships, and flex positions for diverse employees, including new Mainers and over 55 employees?
It's a great question. I'll jump in, but of course also want to invite other panels to share their thoughts. I think Maine is very large geographically, but it's also a very small community. And I think that there are lots of opportunities to partner in this kind of a community. A couple of examples would be, for employers that are interested in trying new models, there's a tremendous opportunity to partner with the education system in the state, to partner with, your local community college campus or other education providers to create a clear pipeline between folks that might be entering the workforce or looking to advance in their career and a job opportunity within your organization. There's a tremendous opportunity to, as we just heard about the Lift All Boats program, to create a pre-apprenticeship program or an internship program or any other type of workforce development program in partnership with Department of Labor or local training providers. There's also, I think, a lot of peer support that's available to employers, to connect with others in your industry, to learn with one another, to try to approach these challenges in partnership or in partnership with groups like Strength in LA or others that are really trying to do good work in the community, and help job seekers overcome obstacles to help them connect to successful employment. So there's really a lot of opportunities, and if there's anything that I could do to help in that, our role is to provide information to people that is actionable for job seekers, for employers. So I'd also encourage, if there's any information that I can share directly or groups that I could speak to, I'm more than happy to share my contact information and come see how I can help.
Wonderful, great. Thank you for answering that, Mark. I'm seeing in the chat that we have people here from USM's English language program. Happy to hear the shout out from Wendy and the RW Gillespie. Also, inviting panelists, people from the community to also, I'm also hearing great things about Strength in LA in the chat. I'm inviting people in the audience to also not only ask questions, but also raise any challenges they're facing related to workforce or workforce development or inclusion that they like to ask us. There's a question here that says, could panelists talk about the recent federal actions and how it has impacted their workplaces, especially around ICE raids? I know some people might not want to talk about that. You don't have to. I will just start by saying a number of employers that I work with have reached out and have done training for their staff and for their employees on how to, what to do if ICE appears at a workplace site. And that training, and I think people bonding, circling around immigrant employees has brought people together in a lot of the workplaces that I've worked with. Is there anyone who wants to add anything about that on the panel? Yeah,
Yeah,
Wendy.
I can. Just because we had to change things, so we educated everybody, right? We did a crash course on education. Like I say, we're very small, so suddenly it's like, all right, now what do we do? So we knew which lawyers to reach out to. We did phone numbers. We had a system in place. We put little signs saying private and all that stuff. And it was kind of interesting because we were happened to be doing job reviews at the same time. So we're sitting there with one of our employees who's from another country, and he's talking about, gee, can I borrow one of the trucks because I think they're following my license plate, right? Because he saw the article about license plates and he was worried. And I'm like, sure, take one of our trucks home if you feel safer in that for a while, right? And you can use that for commuting for a few weeks or whatever. And one of my coworkers started going, well, that doesn't really make sense or something. And I'm like, that doesn't matter what makes sense. What makes sense is to make our employees feel safe. And that was very useful. And then he started thinking about it. Then he went and read these art. He says, well, they're only going after certain people. And I'm like, no, read the articles. And then so he educated himself, and actually his political views kind of shifted at that point because suddenly it's like, wow, this isn't making any sense at all. They're arresting who for what? And you're like, uh-huh. So that whole, as horrible as ICE is, and all of that was a terrible situation, still is, it's also an opportunity to educate people and to kind of make everybody feel safe. And suddenly everybody felt part of that community of immigrants because all the coworkers wanted to protect their coworkers too. So the whole thing was kind of, it was a positive in terms of bringing people together and educating some people who were kind of having blinders on. But it took a lot of time, and we don't have any time. We don't have any excess with this few people, but it was an interesting experience, and it still is. And it did bring our community a little closer together, as horrible as it was.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Wendy. Um, anyone else want to talk about that?
I'll just say I've heard from some of the nonprofits in our region that it has impacted the types of federal funding that they are applying for, so that there are certain compliance regulations that you have to agree to, and they've made the decision to not participate in of applying for that kind of funding. And I totally agree with Wendy that I think the education piece, bringing people together, what the response will be, I think is been key, especially in a region like ours.
Yeah, and I'll say, as I wait for other questions to come in, I'll say that we've had candidates who we've placed in jobs be taken by ICE, be detained without cause for months upon end. And then luckily, due to the support from immigration lawyers and advocacy groups, be released and be told by a judge that they are that they are should have never been taken and that they didn't do anything. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there from people who think, well, it's only people who have committed a crime who are being taken. I think any of us who know people have been taken by ICE know that that's not true. And so it's been a really difficult time for people in this important, vibrant, younger immigrant community coming in to suddenly be afraid to go to work or to go to school. And it's been inspiring to see the school walkers and the coworkers and the employers who have stood up. I love that example Wendy gave about letting this person use a company truck because it made them feel safer. And the fact that education of coworkers to be able to say, well, right now, this is what it takes to have this person feel safe and able to come to work and for us to continue as a team. I think that type of growth is, and that type of conversation is so important that those have been happening. And I just want to give a shout out to all the employers who have stood up for people or written letters for people who were taken by ICE. And I always tell employers, if they have someone who is in any way threatened by ICE or any type of other immigration action, an employer standing up and saying, we need you, and saying to the government, we need this person. We can't make money if we don't have this person back. Give them back to us. That means so much. And I know there's also that other side of employers thinking, well, maybe we should just not let them, like maybe we should avoid contact with them. But standing up for people, it's actually a great way to make employers an employer of choice in this environment, is to say, welcome to our company. We know that there's been a lot going on. We stand up for our employees, and so you can feel safe coming to work with us because we'll be looking out with you. I think that's so important and a great way to attract workforce. So everyone here is doing that work, and I appreciate that. We just have 2 minutes left. I see there was a question: are there partner organizations in Maine that folks on the panel have worked with that have been effective partners? I can certainly give a shout out to MERC, Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, who's been leading the hotline. Other organizations that people want to mention? ILAP, someone wrote. I know Presente Maine. There's been some great work done for fundraising that has also, I guess, an offshoot of Presente Maine. And they said we're going to be discussing, I hear from the organizers, we're going to be discussing workplace compliance and handling ICE activity in the next panel. Great, that's wonderful. So we'll all take notes there. Thank you. That's from Ralph Humiston. Thank you. But so we're about 1 minute away. Is there anything you as panelists want to add, or anything people need to say before we continue? This has been a rich panel, really great. Thank you for pulling together the panelists, Hamza, and for bringing just a great cross-section of leaders in the industry to be able to share their perspectives. And we look forward to the rest of the conference, and greatly appreciate those panelists and you in the audience for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.